shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Behave yourselves!
Hello, YouTubers out there. This is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So, back in 1999, my father and I went to see the Blair Witch Project. And this was a picture that, at that time, was really hyped up. And I had known about the Blair Witch Project for at least a couple of years prior to the film's release. I had seen bits and pieces throughout, and even before the internet went abuzz with its marketing campaign and everything else. And so there was a significant hype around it. Mostly it was labeled as the scariest horror film either of that year or of all time, if not one of the scariest. In hindsight, probably it's not one of the scariest. I didn't think it was one of the scariest when I saw it, but it was certainly one of the most haunting. But I remember my father even saying, at the time, he said, after seeing the movie, and he looked forward to it, and we had seen that sci-fi special Curse of the Blair Witch, which is very good, by the way. If you have the DVD, do check it out if you haven't already, or check it out anyway. It's really quite good, probably almost as good as the film itself. Anyhow, he said, I like the hype better than the movie. So I always thought that was kind of a... I never quite understood that, but nonetheless, that statement can be applicable for how some people have felt about Longlegs. And this is a horror picture that has caused ripples in the horror vortex, for sure, because people still can't really stop talking about this movie. I've seen a lot of people talking about it. There are theories about it and everything else. And it's also been hyped up as the scariest horror film of all time, which is ridiculous. I would never say that. And again, neither would I have said that about Blair Witch Project. Because I think that when you start to see, for me, the scariest is The Exorcist. Probably always will be. As far as supernatural horror is concerned, that to me is the top of the top. And in terms of pure horror, that is to say, undiluted, would be Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, and of course, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. So those to me are, right up there. Of course, Halloween, and I mean a few others, but that's the pantheon. But I will say something about Longlegs. For one, I can't stop thinking about the film. I saw it a few nights ago, and I wrote a review for it, but I can't not stop thinking about this film. I can't. There is something about it that really unsettled me in ways that were not unlike Ari Aster's Hereditary. I will say one thing about Longlegs that isn't too hyped up, which is it's one of the most haunting and unsettling horror films that I've seen in quite some time. I would put Hereditary at that same level. Now, some of you will hear the basic outline as I did, because I didn't really fall into the hype. I saw the teasers for the film, and that was it. I knew Nicolas Cage was in the picture. That is all I knew. And the teasers were really well done. They were about 20 seconds long, 24 seconds. They really give you a sense of something very unsettling, which is exactly what the film is. Now, in its simplest form, Longlegs could be looked at as a film about an FBI agent looking for a serial killer. How often have we seen that? One too many times. There is nothing, that wouldn't be enough of a pitch for a studio or a bunch of studios. I mean, I forget how many studios are involved in this film. It's quite a few. It seemed like the first 5 minutes of the movie, which is the case of many smaller pictures to some degree, like this. You have 5 or 6 different studios involved. Like, you spend 5 minutes looking at all these different studios. Like, oh my God, how many people put in, funded this movie? And if you look at it from that point of view about an FBI agent who's looking for a serial killer, that's enough to just say, no, I've seen enough of that. Enough, please. I mean, what are you going to do here that's going to make it different from the norm? The film almost seems to start off as tongue-in-cheek horror. And the reason I say that is that what we used to call postmodernist, nowadays we call meta. There's a 4:3 frame that you see that looks like some lost reel of film. Right there, and you heard the scratchiness in the soundtrack. It just gives those vibes of some lost 16 or even 8mm film. I mean, it has that feel. So right away I thought, oh, this is tongue-in-cheek horror. It just felt like it was going to be that. I had that feeling. And then the film begins with a girl who's in her house, and she's in her bedroom, and she looks out the window. It's an overcast day. It had just snowed, it looks like. There's a lot of snow on the ground. And she hears a vehicle pull up, and she looks, and she sees some sort of station wagon. This is set in the early 70s. And she steps out, she looks, and we can't quite see what's in that vehicle. I mean, is there somebody sitting there or not? We're not sure. And then she hears a male voice in the background. She looks, she turns around, walks around the back of the house, doesn't see anything. Right there and then I thought, oh, this is not tongue-in-cheek horror. There was something about this that felt like it could happen, which of course it does happen. Is there somebody around? And she seems like she's all alone in the house. That means her mother took off, or her father, or who knows what. We don't know anything yet. And then we see this character pop up. And this character, the frame cuts off his face. So what you see is his lips and really just about to the bottom, just below his chest. That's all you see, and his hands. I mean, so you don't know who this is. And you're not understanding at first the point of view, right? Because if the girl is looking at him, and we know she is, and she's filmed from a low angle, which is very unsettling already, the whole thing, how come she can't see his eyes? Well, that's really more for the audience, not for her, although she may not, if this is a recall of a memory, this opening sequence, she may not recall what his eyes look like. And he darts down below that cutoff. He darts down below that frame, and it's just for a flash, and then that's it. And then we have the titles. So I knew then this was not tongue-in-cheek horror. And then the film flashes forward, and then we're in 1993. And we know we are because in an FBI office, we see a portrait of Bill Clinton. So there's an FBI agent who is partly psychic, and she's played by Micah Monroe, who I had seen. I was trying to remember where I'd seen her before. It was in It Follows, which isn't a bad film. It's worth checking out. Not one of my favorites in the horror film genre, but not certainly worth seeking. Anyhow, so her character's name is Lee Harker, very sullen FBI agent, very sullen. She hardly ever smiles. She is, she doesn't have much of an emotional response to anything. And so what it is, she's assigned to this case where there are some bizarre murder-suicides and letters signed by Longlegs. Now, the problem is that usually the murder is a massacre inside of a family home, and the patriarch has killed his whole family and then kills himself. There's no indication of a forced break-in or forced entry. There are no fingerprints. However, there are these letters, and they can't figure out who's Longlegs and why it's signed Longlegs and why are there coded messages as well. And she's able to decipher and break down these codes quite easily. So then the question is, why is this happening? Who is this Longlegs? Is this Longlegs somehow getting this family to kill them, for the patriarch to kill his whole family and himself? I mean, how's he doing it? Who and why? And why is there a doll that is in the likeness of the daughter or the youngest daughter in the house? What is the significance of that? And that's really where the film left me quite intrigued. I just wanted to find out where this was going. And I couldn't quite get there. I couldn't figure it out. Lee Harker's boss is played by Blair Underwood. A really terrific performance. He's very good. And he can't quite understand what is happening either. What is really going on? And, again, who is Longlegs? Well, Longlegs seems to be that character that you see in the 1970s prologue. But the question is, who is he? I mean, he's pasty-faced. He almost has ruby red lips, but not quite ruby, but almost. And long, curly blonde hair, but, who is this guy? How is he doing this? And if he is responsible, why is he doing this? How does he get these families to do this? And what is the significance of the doll that resembles the youngest daughter in the family? And always around a certain birthday of, I might add, the daughter's birthday. I can't really say much more than that, because if I say much more, it will leave the surprise out. But the difference here between this film and its twist, or twists really, from an M. Night Shyamalan film, and all due respect to M. Night Shyamalan, I mean, I haven't seen his latest film, Trap, but the films that I've seen from him, he only wishes he could make Longlegs. That's how good this film is. The twists in this movie have depth. So once you see what has happened, you can almost understand how the story leads to that, inevitably. And yet you are still perplexed by it. It's not quite David Lynch. The depth to it and the understanding of family and family sacrifice really comes through. And that's what really makes this film. And it has a slightly ambiguous ending, and I was just left in shock. The whole film was haunting. So I'll give you a couple of examples of how haunting this film really is. Or at least what I found haunting. Maybe other people won't find it that haunting, but some might. The character of Lee Harker, she's in her home. She lives by herself. Looks like a log cabin, and it's nighttime. And she is on her laptop and facing the window. And she's framed in such a way that her face is in close-up in the foreground, and in the back you can see the doorway leading to her kitchen and everything else. It's pretty dark. She doesn't have a whole lot of light. In fact, most of the movie is pretty much like that. Very low level lighting, very, very dank, and I think very effectively so, I might add. So, and you keep thinking you're going to see something pop up in the background, and you never do. And then there's another instance later on where she is in one of those, in the FBI offices, a whole line of cubicles. And she hears something. She always hears something, and she looks, and you think you're going to get a false alarm, one of those false scares that you get quite often in movies. I call them false scares because they're not really that effective. When somebody taps him on the shoulder, or she turns around, there's a presence right there, and whatever the case may be, and it never happens. And what's interesting about the earlier scene where she is in her log cabin, she's on the phone with her mother, and it takes an eternity for her mother to answer the phone. She keeps calling and calling. You think the daughter would just give up and hang up the phone, but she doesn't. And the mother finally answers. And then eventually she asks her, why did it take you so long to answer the phone? And you hear the mother's voice. And again, very unsettling. There was something about the mother's voice that didn't seem quite right. Too many pauses. And it's not unlike what you hear in the opening of the film, which you see in the teasers, of the 911 calls. That sort of scratchiness to the recording, right? Oh, something is happening to my daughter. I forget the whole thing now. And then there's either violence has already taken place during this massacre, or it's about to. And that same scratchiness exists in this phone call when she's talking to her mother. And then you hear one of those cliched sounds. It's pretty much a cliche now, where you hear pounding on a door, and it's her front door. But in this case, again, I was quite unsettled. I was scared because I just don't know. Like, what is going on? Is that Longlegs? Who is there? And the film is so effective at establishing not only the mood and the atmosphere, but the soundtrack. It just creeps up on you. It doesn't have you don't even hear a whole lot of music in this movie. There's a couple of songs by T-Rex, either at the end or end credits or at the beginning. But generally speaking, if there is music, it is so subliminal in many ways. It's kind of underscored. It's very, very effective. You don't feel like it's up front and center trying to make you feel scared. And that was a pleasure to hear that once again in a movie, particularly a horror film. This whole film was spine tingling for me. Spine tingling. Spine chilling. And I just can't wait to see it again and see if I feel the same way. Because not unlike Hereditary, which is probably a lot more intense, this film has a certain level of tension throughout. It's directed by Osgood Perkins, who I've never seen his previous films. I don't even know the name, sorry to say. I would like to check out his earlier work. He happens to be the late Anthony Perkins' son. And this guy is good. If he were just to make horror films for the rest of his life, he's got it. I mean, this is one guy, not unlike, say, Ari Aster. He's just a select few that I would say, if they chose to do this frequently for the rest of their careers, he's got it. He knows how to make a horror film. He certainly knows how to make a movie. There's no question. He's very good with the actors. Nicolas Cage is used sparingly in this movie. So when you do see him, it's very effective. Is it a bit out of control and frenzied? Yes. I mean, what do you expect if it's Nicolas Cage playing, presumably, we're not really sure, a serial killer? Yeah, expect it to be, a little bit over the top for sure. But the whole film has a certain kind of punk rock and roll spirit to it in terms of of that character by design. And then the intensity of this investigation and the issues that Lee Harker has, and particularly with her mother, all extremely well handled. Alicia Witt, by the way, plays the mother. And there's a scene where she's looking at her daughter. I can't really tell you what happens in the scene because it will give away too much. Maybe I've said too much already there. But there's something about the way that she looks at her daughter that I felt very uneasy. This movie made me feel very uneasy, very unsettled, and haunted. So I would correct that. I wouldn't say Longlegs is one of the scariest horror films ever made, although it has a couple of scary scenes for sure. But it's one of the most haunting horror films I've ever seen in years. And I've seen my share of horror films. This is truly a compelling movie. I don't even know what else to really compare it to. I can't think of anything specifically. Despite how you could look at the film simplistically as just about an FBI agent on the trail of a serial killer. Just leaving that aside, in terms of how this film is done, its tone, how it plays with your expectations, it's just an incredible film. There's nothing bright or cheery about this world at all. So that might prove to make it even more unsettling for the viewer. And there are some of those flash cuts, which I don't always appreciate seeing because they're also kind of cliches. But here, it really amplifies the storytelling. So, what do the rest of you think? Have you seen Longlegs? Do you share my enthusiasm for this picture? Or maybe you don't. I don't know. I know it's proven to be a little bit divisive, this film, from what I've read. But it is memorable. I mean, I won't forget it. That's for sure. So let me your thoughts. Tell me if you've seen it and what you think of it, and of Nicolas Cage. And particularly of this actress, Micah Monroe. Certainly somebody worth keeping an eye on. And let me your thoughts. And tell me what you think. And if you aren't a subscriber already, please subscribe to my channel. I do reviews, of course, video. I do reviews of films and talk about film-related topics and review all kinds of films, not even just modern cinema. And if you are a subscriber already, please hit the notification bell for future uploads. And that's all I got to say about Longlegs. My spine is already. I'm feeling my spine twitch just talking about this. I don't know how that's possible. I can't. I feel nervous talking about this movie, so that's got to say something. Check this out, please. If any of you share that same enthusiasm, having seen it in the theater, tell me. Because that is why there are just certain movies, as I've said before, that are made to be seen in theaters. This is going to be streaming pretty soon, I think at the end of this month, on Prime Video and elsewhere. I don't think it's going to have quite the same effect, but it might. It might. But in the theater, I think it makes a huge difference. I will see it again, and maybe I'll share my views when I see it again later on. So, anyway, that's all I got to say about Longlegs. And this is Jerry Saravia, The Movies, signing off.